It's no secret that Persona 5 changed the world to both the blessing and dismay of everyone. It's currently going through the same path Persona 4 went through during the gap till the next mainline Persona. We got the spin-off games, the anime, and the many collaborations. There is no shortage of Persona 5 content. It'll be a matter of time till there's a Fortnite collab. For those who really like Persona 5, such as myself, it's cool to see Persona 5 spreading to a lot of different franchises and mediums. However, this is coming at the cost of the same thing Persona 4 suffered from: oversaturation. People are getting sick of hearing about and seeing Persona 5, whether it's having to hear corny game journalists comparing every RPG to Persona 5 and even downplaying the other games for not being Persona 5, or it's the fanbase that can be extremely childish. One of the main criticisms of Persona 5 has to do with its main cast of characters: the Phantom Thieves of Heart, Ren Amamiya, Morgana, Ryuji Sakamoto, An Takamaki, Yusuke Kitagawa, Makoto Nijima, Futaba Sakura, and Haru Okumura. With the recent re-release of Persona 4 Golden and Persona 3 Portable, as well as the upcoming Persona 3 Reload, there's been talks about the main cast of these modern Persona games, with the majority consensus being that the Phantom Thieves are the weakest group. They tend to catch the most strays as protagonists, and while you can just assume that it's just, oh, everyone hates the popular thing, there are some valid arguments that hold weight. Somewhat. Phantom Thieves are my favorite modern Persona group, the group I felt most connected with. So I wanted to get down to it and gather all the criticisms that I've commonly heard about the Phantom Thieves and talk about them all in this video. Whether I agree, disagree, and give my own insight on why the Phantom Thieves are disliked by Persona fans as a group. Let's start off with our player protagonist, Ren Amamiya. Now you're probably thinking that it's not worth mentioning Joker because he's a solid protagonist like the other modern Persona protagonists, and he has no personality. To that I say, you're wrong. There's definitely a lot to work with here to explain why Joker could be considered the weakest character when compared to Makoto Yuki and Yu Narukami. It comes down to the fact that Ren hasn't been allowed to be his own character, and the only time he got that chance was in a shoddily made anime adaptation. Let's compare it to his fellow wildcards. Makoto Yuki has been portrayed to be very quiet, stoic, blunt, aloof, and apathetic. He carries a very introverted and calm demeanor, even when he's being snarky. Narukami, in comparison, is more outgoing with a bigger focus on building bonds with others. He can be witty, sarcastic, and despite being the ladies' man, he's pretty awkward and oblivious when it comes to those situations. Something Persona fans always wave off about Narukami is that he can be a weirdo. Like, he is very strange sometimes. He also has a very dry sense of humor, which for someone like me who also has a dry sense of humor, I like it.
Dude, what just happened?
Something bit me.
Whoa! Anna left teeth marks too! Are you okay?
I might be dying.
No, you're not.
It's much easier to talk about Makoto and Narukami and what makes them stand out because they've gotten the chance to really be their own characters. Makoto has 4 movies and both Persona Q games, while Narukami has the anime, Arena Vanilla, Arena Ultimax, both the Q games, and Persona 4 Dancing All Night. Ren hasn't gotten that chance yet. Not in Q2, not in Persona 5 Dancing, not in Persona 5 Strikers, and it's still not happening in Persona 5 Tactica, which is very weird that they just refuse to let Ren speak on his own. So all we're left with is Persona 5 the animation, and yeah, we know it sucks, but Ren is one of the few highlights of the anime along with Xander Mobus' performance. The reason why Ren could be considered boring in comparison to Makoto and Narukami is that he doesn't get those quirky and silly funny moments that Narukami gets, or the compelling character development that Makoto gets in the movies. Even though Ren has a very tragic thing happen to him, the effects of it are mostly pushed aside and the focus is more on the other characters. So even he gets sidelined in the medium where he should get more screen time. Ren doesn't have anything special in hindsight, but I can argue that he has as much value as the others. Ren comes off as a very quiet and polite individual. He's not as introverted as Makoto, but it's kinda close. He has a very playful and mischievous side, but he can still get flustered when it comes to doing some mischievous acts.
Well, I'm a dad.
When in the metaverse, Joker's a bit more aggressive and very confident in himself. He's definitely a lot more of a show-off. Character that best brings out Ren's personality is, to the surprise of no one, Goro Akechi. The anime was actually able to properly implement more interactions between Ren and Akechi that was sorely lacking in the vanilla version of the game. It's actually the most engaging parts of the anime, and they even had an OVA with Ren coping with Akechi's apparent death after the Shido arc. We get more moments from them that gets added in Persona 5 as well. We actually get to see Ren eventually break down for losing someone he saw he could have been friends with. And before anyone asks, no, I don't ship them, I never will, and I don't care why they should be together. I will not deny, however, that Akechi plays a huge part in Ren's character in all forms of Persona 5 media. Ren is able to stand alongside Makoto and Narukami as memorable protagonists, but they just need to allow him a game for him to actually be his own character. I don't know why Atlas is afraid of doing so. I'm not even going to beat around the bush here. I can't defend Morgana as a character. Morgana is the only character in the main modern roster that I actively dislike along with other Persona fans. And it's all for valid reasons. He doesn't make it easy to get people to like him. However, I want to talk about some genuine positives about Morgana's character. Because there are. It just doesn't shine as much as the negatives. Like it or not, Morgana is the crux of the Phantom Thieves. He's the one that walks the gang through the plans, how the metaverse works, and how to approach fighting enemies for the most part. He is smart when it pertains to the missions and can be very resourceful, such as when he kept tabs on Futaba and discovering Akechi was going to betray them. He also tends to be the main one trying to keep the thieves at a very level-headed manner when things are uncertain. He always wants to do the righteous thing, and he is undoubtedly loyal even if he struggles to show his true feelings. I genuinely do like the conversation he has with Ren further in his confidant when he begins feeling like he found his place and understands what it means to be human. It's just a shame that the character of Morgana that we have to sit through for like 75% of the game is so obnoxious. Morgana uses the character trope of hiding his true feelings by masking it with a very unflattering attitude. This trope is not new. It worked for a character like, say, Midna in Twilight Princess, but Morgana shows off the worst aspects of it. For the majority of Persona 5, Morgana is very pompous and full of himself when it comes to his abilities and smarts. Not in a very endearing way, but more of a would you please shut up kind of way. He does it a lot with Ren already, but when it comes to his interactions with Ryuji, they are the most annoying parts of the game and completely fails when it comes to trying to be comedic. There's taking light jabs and teasing your friends, and then there's just outright being a dick. You can tell that they were trying to mimic Yusuke and Teddy's interactions with Ryuji and Morgana. It does not work the same way. The reason why interactions with Yusuke and Teddy worked was because Teddy has the mental age of a grade schooler, and Yusuke has to be the responsible one to set him straight in the real world. Yusuke and Teddy are like a big brother babysitting his annoying little brother. Morgana, for the most part, is always antagonizing Ryuji. It certainly doesn't help either that Morgana's bickering with Ryuji leads to the worst section of Persona 5, and that does not help either. All because of his fragile ego getting broken. The worst part of it all is, it doesn't even really get resolved with any sort of apology in the end. And there's, of course, the sipping for On. While it's not as extreme as Teddy and his borderline predatory interactions with the female cast, Morgana's constant sipping for On is already not flattering and is a constant eye roll every time it happens. Unfortunately for Morgana, he's a character that's going to stay very stagnant. He's going to continue to be the same pompous know-it-all, and you can only certainly reduce how annoying he can be. But that's pretty much it. Also, please, Atlas, can we please stop with the I'm not a cat gag? It is not funny, I promise you it's not funny. Ryuji is my favorite Persona character. He's the character I have the most attachment and relatability to. I can be honest and say that I can be a bit biased about his character, but I do understand that a character like Ryuji is very polarizing for people. He has some similarities to another certain blonde boy in Persona, Kanji Tatsumi, who is my second favorite Persona character. You can probably see my taste and favorites. Ryuji is the hard-headed, loud, brash, and vulgar character of the Thieves. Much like Kanji, he's very short-tempered and not the sharpest tool academically. Having a character that can get easily irritable, yelling out most of the time, and aren't the brightest can be a bunch of annoying downsides to have as a character. That's how most casual folks see Ryuji, when that's not the complete case. Ryuji is actually a pretty upbeat individual who is very relaxed and chill. Much like Kanji, Ryuji shares the trope of being the tough guy with a big heart, the delinquency being a mask to hide their insecurities. Like with Kanji using his to cope with the rejection he faces due to his enjoyment of feminine-like hobbies, Ryuji uses his to cope with the fact that he's lost everything thanks to Kamoshida. His leg is broken, and it stopped him from continuing track, which was the one thing he was really passionate about and wanted to keep doing to help his single mother. Being a Phantom Thief and being able to make a change for once, it made him feel like he was worth something again. Ryuji himself is a very loyal and dedicated individual, always wanting to stand for what's right and protect the friends that he cares about. He's usually the one always coming up front and vocalizing his anger to those who instigate conflict against his friends, to the point where he would sometimes put his own well-being in danger. Ryuji does get a lot of flack for his very misguided and aimless mind. People are much harsher about Ryuji's lack of smarts because he is such a prominent character in the main story and is one of the few characters going through an active arc. You all know the memes about Ryuji just blurting out about how they're the Phantom Thieves. People exaggerate how much he does it when the one time he made them get discovered, it was through a phone call where he wasn't expecting Makoto to be in the same room as Ren. Ryuji does get more flack for something like that when compared to Kanji or Teddy unconsciously talking about the TV world. And unfortunately for Ryuji, he is chained to the shackles of being the resident butt monkey / comic relief character, much like fellow best friend characters Junpei and Yusuke before him. Ryuji tends to be the character that is the butt of all the jokes. I didn't like it with Junpei, I didn't like it with Yusuke, even if in some cases he deserved it, but Ryuji, it feels more mean-spirited. The two most infamous moments of Persona 5 both involve Ryuji being the butt of the joke, with the latter being the most frustrating because he literally saved everyone's lives. So in response, everyone beats up the abuse victim. Wow, which is supposed to make me rolling on the floor laughing, I guess. Stuff like this is why people roll their eyes when Persona tries to do comedy and it's just tasteless. It's hard to take Ryuji seriously during crucial moments when the writers constantly want to put him down for the sake of a joke. Before I quickly move on though, I do want to talk about this because sometimes reading literacy with the Persona fandom tends to be not good. Again, much like Junpei and Yusuke, Ryuji has a major interest in picking up ladies, which admittedly was one of his main motivators of being a Phantom Thief. And he does have moments where he acts like a pervert, mostly directed towards An. I don't understand how Twitter fellas made these two things correlate, but people actually compared Ryuji making googly eyes and caveman expressions towards An to be on the same wavelength as Kamoshida actually insulting students.
What?
Truly, one of the stupidest things I've ever heard in my life. Especially when a common trait about Ryuji is that he does not take assault and abuse lying down at all. I get it, the pervert trope will always be not funny, but did you also forget that An actually teased Ryuji during the beach arc? And they're best friends, they've known each other since middle school. It's harmless. So how did Twitter relate that to what Kamoshida actually did to the students? I don't get it. Speaking of An, she's definitely at the top as one of the most controversial characters to talk about when it comes to Persona. There's like 4 pillars of Persona discourse. Atlas doesn't care about Persona 1 and 2. Persona 4 is nothing but bigotry. My waifu is better than your waifu. On to Kamaki's existence. It's gotten to the point where she is talked about as much as Kanji and Naoto, which is another one I really don't want to get into. Now, I have actually talked about On before way back in January in my video talking about Gum and how she related to people's extreme reactions and opinions when talking about fictional characters, especially those popular in the not safe for work space. On is one of those popular characters, which upsets a lot of people. However, that's not what we're going to talk about right now. Let's talk about where this resentment towards On comes from, and it doesn't have to do with the character itself, but how the writers have used her throughout Persona 5. The majority agrees that the Kamoshida arc is the strongest beginning of a modern Persona, dealing with such a sensitive topic and how On was at the center of it because of what happened to Shiho due to Kamoshida. Seeing On's awakening, the cutscene at the end of the hype where she wanted to kill Kamoshida, but held back because she wanted him to suffer for his crimes. That day when Kamoshida confessed that she was the one that spoke up to tell him that he needs to take accountability for what he did, it was really compelling. It made you wonder how they were gonna progress on throughout the rest of the game.
What?
I guess the only way is having you go nude.
What?
Fancy you say that, Ryuji. I was just thinking the same thing.
This isn't funny!
Huh?
Oh man, the water's so clear!
Whoa! Okinawa's the friggin' best!
Scenes like these have left a bad taste in people's mouths about On because it's like there's some sort of conflict between what the writers and the story wants to tell us. The writers want us to believe that On has taken back her sexuality and is proud of her looks. You see in game with how she uses the sexy technique or seeing her dances in Persona 5 dancing, which is happening in conjunction with how the game keeps sexualizing her. What do you want us to feel about On, Atlas? People feel like On falls off after the Kamoshida arc. Without the story having a focus on her, she doesn't contribute anything interesting and is seen as some sort of airheaded bimbo. Which is not the case at all, except being an airhead, that's actually a part of her character. Even if she's not the smartest academically, the thing that always shines about On is that she's outwardly kind and caring, and that outgoing nature of hers is what makes her easier to get along with the majority of the characters. She has a great understanding of other people's feelings and is compassionate, which you can really see in the scene where she speaks to Futaba and Alice Hiragi. She has the aspiration of wanting to be better and be an inspiration to others. A ray of light, as she always describes it. However, all these good things get overshadowed because of how the story goes against itself and how they want to portray On, which I imagine is very frustrating to those who are huge fans of On for something that's not explicitly her fault as to why people hate her. Yusuke is a very strange case. More in the sense that he doesn't really have people who hate him, but more those who don't really care for him. Yusuke is a very colorful character with a very eccentric personality. He's definitely more of a comic relief character when compared to Ryuji. The few points where Persona 5's comedy actually gets a chuckle out of people, it usually involves Yusuke. There's the famous crab scene and the posing scene in his social link are proof for that. Much like On before him, to many, Yusuke becomes nothing but a background character who contributes nothing after his arc is finished. It's more prevalent with Yusuke because most acknowledge Yusuke as just being socially inept artist who talks funny. Being an artist is the crux of Yusuke's character. Art is his passion. He sees everything with his own particular artistic vision, from the people he meets and the places he goes to, which in hindsight does make him stubborn in his own right because he really wants to stick to his vision of how he wants to visualize things. Even then, Yusuke tries his best to be more understanding to others and open up from his introverted worldview. I think Yusuke's consistent level-headed nature makes it easier for people to like Yusuke, and it makes those times where he does get angry feel more special. You especially see that in Strikers with Ango Natsume bad-mouthing his mother. After he got his keyword, seeing him snap at Natsume for insulting his mother was really good.
Maybe unprofessional of me, but Professionalism be damned. My mother painted the Sayuri at the cost of her own life. It is her final masterpiece. That painting is crafted with a love that simply cannot be found anywhere else. Don't you dare lump it in with that soulless drivel you cobbled together from authors far more talented than you.
After dealing with a plagiarist who was his former mentor in Persona 5, he was able to approach Natsume with a more focused mind and even told him not to give up and start over. Moments like these are what makes Yusuke stand out. He may not be the most deep, but when he does get his chance to shine, he actually makes it work. Makoto Nijima. Now, funnily enough, Makoto is like the main Phantom Thief that the majority of people like, even the detractors. She's the smart and not cringe one in this band of idiots to most people. Even the game displays that she's the most responsible, and she is essentially the big sister figure for the Phantom Thieves. She's the strategist, the usual mediator and level-headed one to keep the gang calm, the student council president, the one people depend on the most, and wants to set an example for everyone. Probably wondering, if people think Makoto is the only decent Phantom Thief, why would people hate her? Stop me if you heard this one before. Makoto is boring and overrated. Yeah. Detractors of Makoto are not really a fan of her goody two-shoes nature, and their first introduction of Makoto definitely rubbed them the wrong way. It also doesn't help that when compared to the other Phantom Thieves and even side characters, Makoto has one of the weakest confidants in the game, which is a shame. Instead of having a story revolving around her broadening her horizons to the outside world, figuring out what she wants to do with her future, or her strained family relationship, we're left stuck dealing with Eiko and her scamming boyfriend, which takes away any sort of development of Makoto and wanting to get to know her better. Which again is a shame because the story leading up to her awakening is fantastic. Knowing what Kamoshida did but not having the power to do something, being a pawn to the principal to ensure she has a good future, being seen as a burden and useless by fellow students and even your own older sister. Makoto's insecurity building up was the thing that got the Phantom Thieves and herself in danger against Kaneshiro as well. Even through all of that, she was still brave enough to stand up to Kaneshiro, and when she finally snapped, it felt so satisfying that she was finally breaking free from the mask she had to keep on. Makoto may not be my favorite character, but boring is the last thing I'd refer to her as. Also, Johanna is a really sick persona. I can't deny this. Futaba Sakura. This is another one of my favorite Persona characters. Not only that, but her story arc and character was initially the reason I got intrigued in Persona 5 when it first came out. Futaba is the navigator of the game, and she has one of the most essential arcs. Unlike the rest of the palace rulers, Futaba goes a little more in the Persona 4 route where you're trying to save her from her own heart, even down to accepting her shadow giving her access to her persona. While Futaba is not as popular as Makoto, she does have a large number of fans who really love her. She's quirky, silly, and loves to tease, and she's the smartest character in the game, being extremely tech savvy. When she's able to open up after getting her heart changed, Futaba has this infectious energy about her that makes her really relatable. Yes, even the game references and internet lingos. Which you can say is the biggest issue people have with Futaba, and the reason they may find her annoying. Futaba is definitely going to be a character of her time due to the fact that she uses a lot of internet lingo relating to a lot of things to gaming situations, and it's all part of her normal language. It can be really grating for people to have to listen to her speak like that all the time because, like everything on the internet, things become outdated and Futaba herself sounds cringe when she speaks. Despite that though, and I can be honest about my bias here, that stuff is hard to bring down Futaba's character. On top of just being an overpowered navigator, Futaba has the traits that really hits close to me when it comes to being an introverted shut-in. I may not have experienced the horrible past and tragedy she had to suffer through, but the social anxiety and being socially inept connects with how I felt. I'm not the best with people. I struggle to stay engaged with others in conversations if it's not something I'm particularly interested in. Yes, you can make the joke, she's just like me, for real, for real. But that's a good thing, right? If a character shares these similar connections to you, it makes you grow more attached to them. Just like with Ryuji, Futaba does exactly that for me, which makes me more compelled to pair Ren with her because he makes her open up and makes her happy. I love their dynamic together throughout the game. Again, I can admit my bias here, but I just really love Futaba as a character. Haru Okumura. Last but certainly not least is the forgotten Phantom Thief. We all know the meme by now. Haru's screen time in Persona 5 is a joke. And it's all because of this damn cat wanting to take the spotlight away from her. And you can't get to know her early if you happen to finish the palace early, because just like with Mitsuru, her father's death needs to happen. Then afterwards, she doesn't get the time to feel settled in by everyone because of the scandal at the Phantom Thieves being responsible for Mr. Okumura's mental shutdown. So now it feels more than ever that Haru is just filling in the space and not contributing anything besides just being another mouthpiece. Her getting the spotlight taken away from her in her own arc did not compel players to even want to give her a chance to see her confidant because of how badly they screwed her up. And I think what hurts even more is because of people's current disdain for Persona 5's presence, they won't be able to see the wonders that the spin-off games have done for Haru's character. The spin-offs have been carrying Haru on their backs. Because these games feature every character from the jump, we get Haru at the very beginning, and this is where we get to see her personality shine. Haru is a very shy and reserved girl who is usually very polite to her peers. One thing about Haru that I noticed that she's very self-deprecating, stemming from the fact that she has major trust issues by people only using her for her status, which blends into her self-esteem and her struggles to stand up and speak for herself, which is one of the major points of her social link. She wants to feel like she can be depended on and contribute something to her friends. Persona 5 Strikers rectified the mistake that Persona 5 made and gave Haru her own arc to develop her character with an associate of her father, Mariko Hyodo. Seeing the woman that was once kind to her turn to a malicious boss overworking her employees wasn't far off from what her father was doing to the Okumura Foods employees. While Haru couldn't save her father, she was determined to save Hyodo going down the same path that her father did. It felt like she finally got closure to her story that got severely shafted in Persona 5, which is what Haru needed. One last thing is that Haru is surprisingly funny, like genuinely. While you can see they really want Ryuji and Yusuke to be the comic relief, it's Haru that unintentionally manages to land the comedy, and it stems from her slightly sadistic and cold nature in certain situations while keeping a smile on her face.
We're sorry, we just have zero trust in the police.
I told you to stop smiling when you say that.
That driving scene in Strikers is the top one funniest scene in the entirety of Persona 5's runtime, and I don't think it can be beaten.
So I've never really told you guys this, but the moment Haru's hands touch the wheel,
Get ready to shift into overdrive.
Whoa, speak of the devil. Well, you guys got here quick.
I thought we were gonna die.
I think we already did. My soul's barely tethered to my body.
Gonna puke.
Okay.
My apologies, Haru, but I request you steer clear of the driver's seat from now on. I only have so many lives left.
Meow. Meowgon is unconscious. Wake him up.
Hey, Okumura, what happened?
I was just driving normally, I think.
If you still don't like the Phantom Thieves after this, that's completely fine. It is your opinion and your brain. I still feel that some of the hate towards the Phantom Thieves is really unfair. I've seen people in character popularity polls on Twitter just pick characters that they don't even know or don't even like, just to ensure that the Persona 5 character doesn't win, which is super petty. I still think that the most ridiculous criticism towards the Phantom Thieves is that they somehow don't feel like friends. Which, what do you mean by that? If you mean that they're not consistently around and meeting up with each other like the Persona 4 cast, that's a little ridiculous. They do have celebrations and meet up a lot after every mission when they find the time, and they had a whole game where they spent the summer together on a worldwide trip despite the threat. So, what's the argument there? I can understand that the oversaturation of Persona 5 have made people hate the Phantom Thieves, or maybe even heighten their reasons to hate the Phantom Thieves when all they want is Persona 6. I'm personally not aching for Persona 6, but I know a lot of people are, and seeing more of the Phantom Thieves is only making them more annoyed. Personally though, the Phantom Thieves will always remain my favorite modern Persona group. They help me realize that even an outcast like me can grow, and I'll always be happy to see their next adventures. I hold them all dearly. What can I say?